Story number 1. It was just another late-night drive home. The rain was hammering down, making it hard to see the road ahead. That's when I saw her, a figure soaked to the bone, thumb out, desperate for a ride. "Hey, you need a lift?" I asked, rolling down the window. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes, please." She got in, and I noticed she was shivering. "I'm Tom," I said. "Anna?" she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. We drove in silence at first. The rain was relentless, and the only sound was the wipers struggling against the downpour. Anna kept looking over her shoulder, like she was running from something, or someone. "You okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated. "I'm running away," she said, her voice trembling. "From my ex. He's dangerous." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to help, but this was way over my head. "Do you want me to take you to a police station?" She shook her head fiercely. "No, he's got friends there, just drive." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was getting weird. I decided to take her to the next town and drop her at a motel or something. As we drove, Anna started talking. Her stories were all over the place, about her ex, about places she had been. Some of the things she said made no sense, like they were from a different time. She talked about a fire at a mill, a flood in some town I'd never heard of. I tried to make sense of it all, but it was hard. The storm was getting worse, and I had to focus on the road. Every now and then, I'd catch her staring at me with this intense look, like she was trying to tell me something without words. Finally, we reached the next town. I pulled up to a motel and looked over to tell her, but the seat was empty. She was gone. Just gone. I freaked out. I searched the car, thinking maybe she'd fallen out or something, but there was no sign of her, not even a wet patch on the seat where she'd been sitting. I didn't know what to do. I drove to the police station even though she didn't want me to. I told them everything, and they looked at me like I was crazy. But when I described Anna, the color drained from one of the officers' faces. "We need to show you something," he said. They took me to a room with photos of missing people. And there she was, Anna. Except the photo was old, faded. She'd been missing for over 50 years. I felt dizzy. None of this made sense. How could she be in my car, then just vanish? And how could she be missing for decades? I couldn't sleep that night. The story haunted me. I started digging, looking up old newspapers, talking to locals. Turns out there were a lot of strange stories about that road. Disappearances, sightings of people who shouldn't be there. And there was a story about a girl who'd run away from an abusive partner. Decades ago, she'd vanished on that road. I went back to that road night after night, hoping to see Anna again, to get some answers. But she never appeared. Then one night, as I drove down that same stretch, I saw something in the rearview mirror. It was Anna, sitting in the back seat. She looked sad, lost. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice a distant echo. "I just wanted to go home." Story number 2. We moved into the old Henderson place last summer. It's this big, creaky house on Maple Street, the kind that looks like it's hiding secrets. Mom said it was full of character. I just thought it was old. The first few weeks were normal. You know, the usual unpacking, complaining about not having Wi-Fi, and exploring the neighborhood. But it was during one of those boring, rainy afternoons that I found it. The hidden room. It was an accident, really. I was in my room, the one with the weird wallpaper, and I leaned against the wall. There was a click, and part of the wall swung open. Behind it, there was a small room, barely bigger than a closet, filled with old boxes and dusty furniture. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crawled inside. It was then that I noticed something weirder, a small, round hole in the wall that looked directly into the living room. I could see the back of our TV and part of the couch. It was like a secret spying spot. I told my sister, Lily, about it. She's 12 and thinks she's a detective or something. She was thrilled. "We have to explore it more," she exclaimed. We waited until our parents went to bed and snuck into the hidden room with flashlights. That's when we found the recordings. There were tapes, dozens of them, labeled with dates and times. "We shouldn't watch these," I said, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. But Lily was already loading a tape into an old player we found in the corner. The screen flickered to life, showing the living room. But it was different, furnished in a way I'd never seen. The camera was stationary, like it was hidden. We watched, silent, as a family moved around the room. They were unaware they were being filmed. It was creepy, watching these strangers in our living room. Then, Lily gasped. "Look!" She pointed at the screen. There, in the corner of the room, barely visible, was a figure, just standing there, watching the family. My heart raced. This wasn't right. We turned off the tape, deciding to tell our parents in the morning. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the figure in the video, wondering who they were, why they were watching. The next day, when we told Mom and Dad, they were concerned, but thought it might just be old home movies. "We'll check it out tonight," Dad promised. But that evening, things got weirder. I was in my room when I heard a noise from the hidden room. A creak, like someone stepping on an old floorboard. I froze, listening. It came again. A slow, deliberate creak. Someone was in there. I grabbed Lily and we quietly went to our parents' room. "There's someone in the house," I whispered, shaking. Dad went to check, a baseball bat in hand. We followed, hearts pounding. He opened the hidden room, but it was empty, just as we'd left it. "Probably just the house settling," Dad said, but his eyes were worried. We watched another tape that night, all of us together. This time the figure was clearer, a shadowy presence in the background. It was chilling, knowing someone had been watching this family, our family. We decided to lock the hidden room and call someone to investigate in the morning. But as we tried to sleep, I heard it again, the creaking from the room. I was too scared to check. In the morning, the door to the hidden room was ajar. I felt a chill run down my spine. We hadn't unlocked it. Inside, everything seemed normal, until Lily pointed to the floor. "Footprints," she whispered. There, in the dust, were fresh footprints leading to the hole in the wall and back to the door. We called the police, but they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. "Just an old house," they said. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I stayed up, watching the door to the hidden room. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, it was dark, and there was a faint light coming from the room. I crept closer, heart pounding in my chest. The door was slightly open, and inside, the old tape player was running. But there was no tape this time. Instead, the screen showed a live feed of my room. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat. The screen was showing me, standing there in the dark. I was being watched right now. I ran to my parents' room, yelling for them to wake up. When we got back to the room, the screen was black. The tape player was off. "We're leaving," Dad said, his voice firm. We packed a few things and stayed at a hotel that night. The next day, we learned the truth. The police found a hidden passage leading from the hidden room to outside. Someone had been living in our walls, watching us through the hole. Story number 3. I have always believed in the power of the mind, its capacity to heal and to harm. As a psychiatrist, I've seen it all, or so I thought. But my last session with Michael, a long-term patient, was something else entirely. It was a Thursday, a day that would forever alter my perception of reality. Michael had been my patient for years, struggling with vivid delusions. He often spoke of a shadowy figure, a constant presence in his life, dictating his actions, whispering dark thoughts. I had always considered these episodes a product of his troubled psyche. The Thursday, as Mikhail sat across from me, something was different. His usual nervous demeanor was replaced by a calm, almost eerie stillness. "Doctor, today I want to tell you about the shadow," he said, his voice unnervingly steady. I leaned forward, ready to delve into another of his hallucinations. But as he described the shadow in meticulous detail, A chill ran down my spine. His descriptions matched the nightmares that had haunted me for weeks. A tall, dark figure, always just out of sight but ever present. I had never mentioned these dreams to anyone. "It knows you, Doctor," Michael continued. "It has always known you, just like it knows me." I tried to maintain my composure, but his words stirred an unexplainable fear within me. I told myself it was a coincidence, a trick of the mind. We often find connections where there are none. The session continued, and Michael described how the shadow had started to infiltrate his day-to-day life, not just his thoughts. He talked of whispers in the night, of feeling watched, of a creeping sense of dread that never abated. As he spoke, the room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. I attributed it to my growing anxiety, a professional hazard when dealing with such intense delusions. "Doctor, it wants something from us," Michael said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "What does it want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Freedom," he replied. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the passage of time in the suffocating room. I felt a growing urge to end the session, to escape the oppressive atmosphere that Michael's words had created. But before I could speak, the lights flickered, casting the room into semi-darkness. My heart raced, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move just at the edge of my vision. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear. This was ridiculous, I told myself. I was a rational professional, not given to flights of fancy. "Michael, I think we should continue this discussion next time," I suggested, eager to conclude the session. He nodded, standing up slowly. "Be careful, Doctor," he said, his tone serious. "It's closer than you think." After he left, I sat in the dimly lit room, trying to gather my thoughts. The sensation of being watched lingered, a psychological residue from the session, I assumed. That night, I found no solace in sleep. The dreams came again, more vivid than ever. The shadow loomed over me, whispering things I couldn't understand. I woke up in a cold sweat, the remnants of the dream clinging to me like cobwebs. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake off the sense of dread. Michael's words echoed in my mind, intertwining with my own experiences. The boundary between his delusions and my reality blurred, leaving me in a state of constant uneasy. I started noticing small, inexplicable occurrences. Objects in my office moved slightly from where I left them, faint whispers when I was alone, fleeting shadows that vanished when I turned to look. I rationalized each incident, but deep down, I felt the growing fear that something was terribly wrong. My logical mind battled with the primal fear that Michael's delusions were somehow becoming my reality. I pored over my notes from our sessions, looking for something I might have missed, some clue to explain what was happening. But there was nothing, only the ramblings of a disturbed mind and the scribblings of a doctor who was slowly losing his grip on reality. The final straw came one evening when I was working late. The office was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock. I felt a sudden chill, and when I looked up, I saw it. A dark figure, just a silhouette, standing in the doorway of my office. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I was alone again, but the damage was done. My scientific skepticism crumbled, replaced by a terrifying acceptance. I realized then that the line between sanity and madness was thinner than I ever imagined. Michael's delusions and my reality had merged into a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The shadow was no longer just a figment of a disturbed mind. It was my reality too, a haunting presence that defied explanation. As I sit here writing this account, I can feel it watching me, waiting. I don't know what it wants or why it has chosen us, but I know I can't escape it.